Welcome to the You Love to See It podcast, coverage of your Seattle Mariners. Hello and welcome once again to the You Love to See It podcast, coverage of your Seattle Mariners. I'm your host, Jake. You can find me on Twitter at Mariners Jerseys, and you can find all episodes of this podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a like, subscribe. It would be very appreciated. You can comment down below who you'd like to see next, or just any Mariners takes, go for it. And if you're listening on streaming platforms, please leave a 5-star review and follow the show. It helps a lot more than you know. Today, we have another guest, and it's none other than Connor, also known as TheCouchGM. It's currently sitting at 7.5K subscribers, and TheCouchGM's YouTube channel is home to high-quality content covering various topics within the baseball sphere, Mariners news, player profiles, interviews with people in the community, including creators and even players. He even has an interview with Justin Topa coming out tomorrow, which will be very cool to see. And he has aspirations to make TheCouchGM into a sports media brand, and he definitely is on the way to that. So Connor, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jake. I'm excited.
Yeah, no, I very much appreciate you taking the time out to come on here. The first thing I have to ask, and I've always been intrigued, is those decorations in the back, the Seattle Mariners thing, and the trident. How did you get those? Because I've never seen those ever.
I bought them.
Oh, nice. Where did you buy? Are they like an Etsy thing, or because they can't be the original store, right?
It's called Hex Head Art.
Okay.
And so these are like actual like metal signs.
Whoa, those are cool. They're like 3D.
And yeah, like 3D.
Nice.
And so
we need to get a sponsorship for CouchGM on Hexhead. Get a 10% off code or something.
Yeah, right. So actually, I had bought the Trident myself when I first started the channel because I was trying to figure out a background for what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And then I reached out to the company. I was like, hey, I have a YouTube channel, and I think I had like around 1,000 subscribers, maybe less. Okay. And I was like, hey, if I make a video of an unboxing type thing. So they ended up sending that Compass Rose, I think, for free for me just to do an unboxing. Also with the Glance LED panel there, that's another product that I was just interested in. So I reached out to the company, and I ended up buying it for like at cost to the company, and I have an affiliate code. So if someone uses CouchGM to buy one of those, then I would get a percentage and they get a discount.
Okay.
So it's just one of those things to, if you want something, then at some point you can start to leverage the views that you get and all that to get certain things, I guess.
Yeah.
That you're wanting.
No, I've always thought those were cool, and a lot of the reasons I've been doing these podcasts with other creators and whatnot is just to kind of get that connection with the people that when I first started watching Mariners content, to get a better understanding of the team, since it was only been a couple years now that I've really been following them. There's other reasons why I like your channel and whatnot, but also those caught my eye, which you can kind of see a little bit of like the inspiration there. I'm like, oh, those are like the nice LEDs and whatnot. So no, I thought those were really cool. I thought I had to ask that, but
thanks.
Yeah, so I guess we'll start with kind of the classic podcast way of just getting to know you a bit better, and how you got to where you're at now. So I guess we'll start with just how did your love for not only the Seattle Mariners, but just baseball in general form? Where did that begin for you?
Yeah, so since childhood. So I grew up, I'm a middle child of, I have 2 brothers, middle child. And so grew up in a really competitive household, as you might imagine, with me and my brothers, and competing in every way. We'd play every sport growing up. We started off playing soccer super young, baseball, eventually got into football. We played basketball, pretty much everything. And then getting into, and like our family wasn't like super huge into watching Mariner games or baseball, anything like that. We were always out playing and doing it. And then, getting into middle school, high school, eventually I focused on just playing baseball and football in high school. As you found out, I'm from Vancouver, Washington, technically Ridgefield. And so I went to Skyview High School, played baseball, football there. Actually swam my senior year. My buddies and I did that as like this is a fun senior year sport that we'll just do together, and ended up being the hardest sport ever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's like I feel like swimming is only for like those 4A level high schools. I was Schuylkill where I went, I did not have that at all. I don't think they had it until after I left. Granted, I wouldn't have done it. I'm a horrible swimmer when it comes to like speed, but yeah, that's so cool that you had like that much I guess choice for that. I wish I had that, to be honest.
yeah, but yeah. I mean, it's like one of those things. Oh, this will be fun, but you use every muscle in your body all the time.
Oh
And then
yeah,
my coach made me do the 100 butterfly the entire year, so
rough.
that was that was a challenge. But yeah, I've always been a baseball fan. Watched the Mariners a lot. Play MLB The Show a ton and
Hmm.
various other video games like sports, Madden. And then yeah, so I went to Skyview High School, went over to Washington State University over in Pullman, and ended up majoring in finance and marketing. I didn't really know what I wanted to do in school or what I wanted to do as a career,
Hmm.
but I was working in a steel mill throughout my summers in college. My dad has been a steel salesman since he graduated college. He went to UW. Um, and so I was working 12-hour shifts, swing shift in the steel mill during those summers, and found out really quickly I did not want to be doing that. And
Yeah.
my uncle actually gave me the book, The Millionaire Real Estate Investor, which on that Day in the Life vlog, I popped up a image of that. And so I ended up reading that book when I was sitting out in the paint shed and learned about investing in real estate, passive income, all those types of things. And that's what made me want to major in finance, to just learn about basically how money works.
Yep.
And then at the same time, I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I decided to major also in marketing. Um, so I ended up just having a foot in the door at a mortgage company out of college. Got into mortgages because I knew at the very least I could learn about the process of financing for what I want to do long term, which is invest in real estate.
Hmm.
And then, like 8 years later, here we are. But got into a competitive fantasy baseball league out of college. A buddy
Nice.
that I met in college got me into his group, and that made me want to really start watching a lot more baseball and watch every team, not just the Mariners. Like every time my starting pitcher is pitching, I want to be watching them to see if their stat line is true to what actually happened, or if they were still filthy. There
Yeah.
was just a hitter that got lucky type thing.
Uh-huh. That makes
Because then
sense.
yeah,
Got to watch the BABIP.
right. Because then you could see if yeah, if the stats were lying, or if someone drops a guy for no reason, you pick him up off the waiver wire, and then he
Hmm.
turns out to be a stud. But yeah, just got locked into baseball and watching baseball, and then when the Mariners started the rebuild in 2019, that's when I really started to lock in on what was going on with the Mariners and the moves that they were making. And if you were following really at all, you could see that things were trending in a certain direction to where their farm system ended up being one of the best in baseball. And that leads into, hey, the Mariners are going to be contending for the playoffs the next 5-10 years realistically. And at the time, I think it was just Locked On Mariners that was really talking about Mariners on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I was looking for certain information on players that I wasn't necessarily finding. So just decided to start making content that I myself would want to watch, and that led into the player profiles and various other things. And it's been a blast since.
Gotcha. So it was kind of that there was nothing in the market to meet the demand that you had that kind of triggered you to start making those videos.
Exactly. Right.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, when I first saw your channel, and granted this was like about a year ago at this point, when really started to dive more deep into it, the major uh, things that impressed me were the professionalism of it, and from the setup to the editing, the fact you were doing interviews with players themselves, which really no one else seemed to be doing at the time. And so I guess a couple things within that I wanted to touch on with you, starting with the editing. You posted a picture, actually. I think I have a thing over here. Where is it? There, yeah, you posted
Yeah.
a picture of the Final Cut Pro workflow for a 14-minute player profile. Um, so as someone who I really enjoy editing, I still am very at the basic level of it, and I only use like Premiere and Rush. So you use Pro or Final Cut Pro, which is definitely a lot more intuitive than what I use. Um, so did it seems like you were pretty self-taught with that. So how did you come to like find your editing style with that?
Yeah, so I mean, I've always been a creative, you could say, since I was young.
Mhm.
I've always liked to, when I was growing up, I would draw or sketch cartoons, like look at a cartoon and then draw it myself, or
Yeah.
write a random story out of some story that I created. I've always been creative in that sense, and this has really allowed me to be able to be creative in certain ways that I really enjoy. And it's, the love of baseball plus having my spin on things. And so that's why the player profiles, they aren't as frequent because they take so much time
Yeah.
and it's really a lot of thought. And I feel like I have to find a different song for each player profile, and
Hmm.
then you have to edit, that first minute or so to that song to make it look good, and then it flows into the player story.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, finding my sense of editing, the first video was really basic, and I basically just pulled out my mic, I set up my phone on a tripod, started recording,
Hmm.
and I talked about the Adam Frazier trade that happened. And I wasn't it was really straightforward, no music in the background, just me talking, me overlaying graphics
Yeah.
at certain points, and then over time, you just add one thing, as we mentioned, kind of off air. And like as Scott Service and the Mariners say, it's 1%. Just get 1% better every day. If you
Hmm.
just get 1% better every video that you're working on and editing, then that's a compound effect that a year from now you'll be so much better. So it's been a very gradual thing. But then when Cal Raleigh was starting to pop off last year. It was 2022, yeah. So not 23, yeah, 2022. Adley Rutschman obviously was a rookie catcher at the same time,
Yeah.
and he was getting all of the headlines. And I felt that Cal Raleigh deserved some spotlight, so I was like, you know, I need to make a profile on this guy, show why he should be talked about, and go through the story of who he is, while also making it a funny, twist on Big Dumper because
Of
that's
course.
one of the best nicknames in the sport.
It is. Yeah. There's no, there really isn't a better one in my opinion at this point.
Yeah,
So,
takes the cake.
yeah, I don't remember who it was. I think it was the Mariners Twitter account who, gosh, or no, I think it was the Mariner Mojo guys on your stream last night. I think said had some insane segue about Cal where they're just like, oh, talking about ass, like Cal Raleigh. I'm just like, that's what we're using to just even bring up his name at this point. It's great, but and I'm glad he's leaned into it. So, but yeah, I definitely agree. It's the best one in my opinion.
Yeah, so that was the first player profile, and then that started the series of like one-off videos about that player, and that's what you would call evergreen content. There's trending content, and then there's evergreen content.
Mm-hmm.
The trending is if something happens today that's in the news, you just make a video on that, and then so many people are already looking for that content. Your video has the potential to be found, and also to like ride on the coattails of bigger videos that are also on the same subject, because it
Yep.
might recommend your video as a suggested video. But evergreen content, like those player profiles, you could watch it 5 years from now, and it's still relevant for the most part because it's talking about his story and how he got to where he is today. And so, his background isn't going to change. So that was my thought process with those player profiles, and then also to be able to really inform the average fan of who they are, why they're good, and why they should pay attention to them.
Yeah, no, I really like that idea. Is kind of mixing the two of having still those videos that are capitalizing off of news that are coming out now, and other things that are just straight up more original to you and stuff you really put time into. That it's definitely a really it's hard to be a content creator in that sense because it's easy and it certainly makes you feel good to make content that is after what's relevant right now and see that number go up and be like, oh, this is awesome. But then I do think people kind of underrate that feeling of when you put a lot of time, a lot of research, a lot of effort into something that takes you, let's say 10 plus hours when you're adding it all together, and it just all comes to be exactly what you had in your mind. That honestly, there's no better feeling than that in my opinion. I'd rather have Granted, I haven't done a video like that. I have in the past for other things, but like, uh, I don't think people understand that. Like, I will take a video that goes 150 views for the first week or whatever on something that I'm really passionate about, like that, versus 700 views that people just kind of watched and then that was it, right?
Right.
And so kind of, what would you say? Would you say the player profiles are the most rewarding piece of content for you, or would you say it's like the interviews that you've been doing, or anything in particular?
Well, yeah, I guess when you compare the interviews to the player profiles, it's, I mean, the doors that it's opened and the
Mm-hmm.
opportunities have been a lot of fun. And I mean, when I first started my channel, I honestly saw channels with 400,000 subscribers and was watching their content. And I was like, I mean, if I take the time to really sit down and make a quality video, I feel like I can make better content, which,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not to talk myself up, but it's just like that mindset of I'm going for quality. And even if, this video isn't going to get the views today, it's funny how if you make a video on something that you foresee becoming a topic down the road, like I made a video on Nick Castellanos and his son Liam because I
Mm-hmm.
saw, their dynamic on the field. It got like no views because my subscriber base is a lot of Mariners fans. And
Mm-hmm.
so naturally they're not going to click on it. But then once the Phillies got to the playoffs and people started to see Liam, they typed in his name and then my video just shot off.
Yeah.
So it's some of those things are, yeah, it's not a instant gratification thing. It's a long play. Same thing with the subscriber growth.
Yeah.
You want that slow and steady trickle up because that's when you really get the quality subscriber base. But I mean, it's all been rewarding. Being able to be on the fields and interview players has been pretty mind blowing.
Yeah.
So very grateful for that and those opportunities. But outside of the player interviews, yeah, the player profiles, I would say I'm the proudest of.
Yeah, well, and is personally, or sorry, this leads into my next question the best. People can find, like I said, interviews with Mariner players on your channel. There's a Julio Rodriguez, Logan Gilbert, Cal Raleigh. As someone who aspires to reach the level of interviewing players in the future, like myself, how did you get your foot in the door to get that access, to even be on the field for part of those?
Yeah, so I mean, some of it is luck and just connections. It's really all about who you know.
Mhm.
So have you heard of Hood to Coast down here in Portland, where you start at Mount Hood and then you run down to the coast?
I have
It's
not heard
a
of
it's
that,
a
no.
relay race.
Okay.
I did Hood to Coast one year, and one of the teammates that I ran it with, he was actually he works for either NBC or some big cable television to
Hmm.
help with like the lighting for sporting events. Anyways, he gave me someone's Twitter account to DM, and she was an on-field broadcaster at the time for the Mariners.
Okay.
And then she responded eventually to me and said, "Hey, you should DM this person." So then eventually he responded to me, and he ended up being the media contact for the media setting up interviews with players. And
Okay.
so last spring training, basically I jumped on a phone call with him and just explained who I am, what I'm doing, what my goals are, and a part of that, I just had released the Bryce Miller player profile like a week or two before that.
Hmm.
And so he set up a 15-minute Zoom interview with Bryce Miller during spring training last year.
Okay.
And that was my first, like foot in the door opportunity. Here's 15 minutes to kind of show what I'm doing. And so had crazy butterflies before that
I would
and a
imagine.
little during it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that was my first time being like, wow, this is actually happening right now.
Yeah.
That went well, and had another one with Taylor Dollard after that, and then eventually he helped me get media credentialed by Major League Baseball. So now when I want to go to a game and cover it, basically I just apply. If they have room in the press box, then I'll get my credentials accepted, and then I'm on field for batting practice. And that's really just me carrying around my tripod with my camera.
Hmm.
I have a lapel mic that I attach to a mini bat
I
that you
saw
probably see in my
that.
videos.
Yeah. Yeah. Gotta do what you gotta
Um,
do.
yeah, and so yeah, I just set up the tripod, hit record. When someone's walking off the field after their warm ups, I'm like, hey, do you have time for a couple questions? And you can't take no's, personally. Nothing's personal. You
Yeah.
just have to shoot your shot basically. And same thing with the connections. Like these interviews I've been getting this off season with all of the prospects,
Yep.
it's all from me messaging them on Instagram.
Okay.
So none of those are like warm introductions or anything. It's just me saying, "Hey, love to get you on the podcast," and eventually they'll check it. So
Yeah, no, and I was gonna ask you about the nervousness. So
yeah,
as you're talking to these like important people, like for me, I already get nervous doing any of these podcasts with just creators. Like if
it's
you watched
natural.
my yeah, if I watched your or if you watch my podcast with Ty, my cheeks are so rosy the whole time only because I was just so nervous, and it was my
Yeah.
first time, so it makes sense a little bit. So I have to imagine it's like another level when you're talking to a player, someone who's dedicated their life to what they're doing. Um, so I guess how do you overcome that mental hurdle when you're either going to ask them like, "Hey, are you willing to answer some questions?" or just in general when you're setting up these interviews, like right before you hit record, how do you get over that?
Yeah, well, part of it is definitely being prepared.
Mhm.
I mean, naturally, like with the Bryce Miller, I had just gone through his entire background and I knew like as much as I could find on him before that interview, but I was still extremely nervous. I'm naturally an introvert, you might not know, but so it takes a lot for me to get out and try to do these types of things, especially, driving to T-Mobile Park. A lot of the times I have butterflies, like, what's going to happen today? Who am I going to get? What am I going to ask? All these things.
Yep.
But the being prepared definitely helps take a lot of that off. And so then it's a matter of, I am prepared because I know so much about each individual player.
Hmm.
And I know that if this one player comes up to me, I'll be able to ask a specific question to him. Or if this other person comes up, then, hey, I have a question for him. So that definitely helps is just being prepared, rehearse it in your head, and then it's at the end of the day, it's just a conversation.
Yeah. Well, who would you say has been I guess your favorite so far when it comes to all the interviews? I'm not going to ask you who's your least favorite because we're not about to out anyone in a negative way. So I got to ask, like, who was, when you were done with that interview, you're like, that was sick. This is going to go great on the channel. Who would that be for you?
Well, of course, when Julio came up and he said, "Yeah," to some questions, then I was like, "Oh my gosh, here we go! Like this
Yeah,
is your
right.
chance, basically." Um, but I'll tell a story actually. So it was the year prior, so I didn't have any access. But I had made a player profile on Andres Munoz,
Okay.
and when I make a video, I'll chop it up into shorts,
Hmm.
little chunks of meat basically that I could post across social media platforms. And
Yep.
I always tag the players in it. And then one night I was at my parents' house for dinner and I checked my phone and Andres Munoz followed me and then he liked
Nice.
all my posts. And I'm like, what's going on right now? So then
That's sick.
I DM'd him over Instagram and we just like had a little conversation over Instagram. I sent him a link to his player profile, and he was like, "Yeah, I watch your videos. I'm a fan." I was like, "No way!"
That's
So
awesome.
at the playoff game that year, I DM'd him before the game. I was like, "Hey, I'm going to be up at the game," and so he told me he would be coming out in like the fourth inning. So I was standing in the bullpen and like waiting for him to come out. There was a cop right next to me. I was like, "Hey, just so you know, like I've been talking with Munoz, and he's going to come up and say hey." And the cop just looks at me, and he's like, "No." And I'm like, all right, I'm just letting you know, like, and so Munoz comes out, he goes, sits down, and then he starts looking around. I wave at him, and
Mhm.
then he comes over, and then that same cop I asked to take our picture. So, I mean, that was an awesome moment, and that was pretty surreal, just being able to connect with someone, especially Munoz. And Munoz is the nicest dude.
Yeah.
There's a lot of nice guys on the Mariners on the sidelines. Munoz is, I mean, he's just a quality guy.
No, that's awesome. I can't imagine the just kind of that feeling of it's got to feel so validating first, a player being a fan of you and watching your content. Like, uh, yeah, I can't
Huge
imagine.
motivation.
Oh, I would
Yeah.
imagine, yeah. So the other day you had the Locked On Mariners guys on your podcast, and Ty said something I really loved, and I even put on Twitter that about how awesome it's been to see people in the community make content, get more voices out in there. Um, So to kind of touch on that, for such a tribalist ecosystem that sports fandom can be, how important do you think it is for the creators in the Mariner space to network, be more connected with each other, and do these kind of collaborations, whether big or small? I mean, granted, you're at 7K, I'm at like 100, so it's very it's been crazy to see how many people have been so willing to come and talk with me. So, how important do you think all of that is ultimately for the future of the space?
Yeah, I mean, it's super important, and ultimately, it's all about building community. And because if you're by yourself over here on an island, you can only do so much. And what fun is that? Be able to both help people, grow with you, and then to ask for a hand from someone above you to help, then pull you up too. I mean, that's what it's all about. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think the more that we can connect, and we have that fantasy baseball league that we're going to be doing, that's going to be fun.
Yeah, I
Um,
haven't announced
yeah,
that yet, but
bouncing
I
ideas.
guess we'll go about announce it. We'll talk about that in a minute, but go ahead.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, just connecting with people, and we all have a common goal to, create content about the team that we love and talking the sport that we love. So, what can go wrong from that?
Yeah, no, I've really been I personally blown away by the amount of support, not only from just people who watch the content, but by the other creators that I've had on the show. Like it's been very I don't want to say validating yet, because at the same time, like, I feel like it'll get there at some point. But I think for people like you or like Ty or like the Mariner Mojo guys who uh I think it's got to be probably weird for you guys to understand or like hear that, like, coming on a podcast for someone else like me, it is very it just means a lot, I guess. And that's got to feel weird because you were at at one point that little felt like a little fish in the sea of YouTube, and YouTube is such a hard thing to go well. So it's probably got to feel weird that you're at the point now where it's like, oh, people look up to you now in the space and are like, are fans of you. So has that been kind of weird for you, that feeling of you are now one of the, I guess, big fish when it comes to the Mariners content space?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of funny to hear. Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's definitely a bit surreal, I guess you could say. What's definitely surreal is when you're walking around T-Mobile Park, and then someone's like, "Oh, it's the Couch Jam,"
Yeah.
and just having a conversation with a random person. But at the same time, and because like I'm introverted, so it's not naturally something that I would be seeking out. But
Yeah.
it's fun to be able to connect with people and to talk with them. And I mean, like I say, this is really just the start of what's to come. So
Yeah, and I wanted to ask about that. So you made it clear that your goal for the Couch GM is to make it into a sports media company. Recently, you announced the Couch GM Soccer with hosts Kat Tar and Laura Schott. So if you like soccer, you should go check that out. So what inspired you to have that aspiration to eventually expand into a full sports media company? Because for guys like me, and I'm assuming a lot of other ones, it's really just get a lot of subs, keep talking about the team you like, but yours is a lot bigger of a dream than I feel like a lot of people have.
yeah, I mean, and to be honest, when I first was starting on my channel, I wasn't thinking of turning it into something huge. I was thinking of maybe I could get 100,000 subscribers talking about baseball or the Mariners. But as it continued to grow, and just with all of these connections I've gotten, these interviews I've done, and these people I've met, it started off with someone that I went to Hawkinson, actually. A
Okay.
buddy of mine, his name's Will. He played football at Central Washington, a lineman, and then he went and he's a regular on 1080 Sports The Fan in Portland, a
Okay.
sports radio show. And so I met with him for happy hour one day and just got to know him. And as much of a nerd as I am with baseball, he is for football.
Hmm.
And just our conversations that we had, and then I have some other friends that are friends of other sports too. But we did some live streams and we just had good conversations. And then throughout the football season, we were doing like a weekly college football podcast. It wasn't getting much traction or anything like that, but it was just a lot of fun to talk with him. And
Hmm.
the more that it started to progress, I just started to think more in a grand scheme of things. And like what if he would be able to come and be couch GM football for me? And then Kat Tar and Laura Schott, they're both realtors in the area, and so I got connected to Kat. She so she's local. She ended up going and playing soccer at Missouri, and then she went pro in soccer in the U.S. And same with Laura. She went and played Cal Berkeley, and then went pro in the U.S. And then they both played overseas in Europe also.
Mhm.
And I just connected with them, talking about my vision for what I'm doing. And ultimately, it's like my goal is to help connect the fans to the players and to just have deep, meaningful conversations with players, because it's like with Justin Topa's story. That's a story that's full of adversity, and that guy worked his butt off to get to where he is today. Had to overcome so much adversity with the injuries and all that stuff to get to the big leagues. It's not that everyone's a first round draft pick and they're a Julio that gets a quick rise to the
Yeah.
bigs. Of course, Julio put in the work, but so ultimately, it's just about telling stories. And they were like, okay, well, we have some pretty cool connections in the soccer world. I think it'd be cool if we started to maybe we could have a podcast on your channel. So that's where the soccer came to be. So they have their own podcast that we're going to be bringing in different people from soccer throughout the country and the world, really have conversations, both them with the people. Any podcast that they want to bring me on, I'd be happy to do that. But yeah, ultimately, if I could, it's like with Barstool, like with John Boy Media, have different personalities that are under the umbrella of the Couch GM,
Yep.
because it's like we're sharing the common goal, but then they have their unique spin or take on things.
Yeah, and I think it's really awesome what you're doing, and I surely hope that it gets to that level that you want it to be. Have you ever considered, like, what if, let's say, the Mariners ever reached out to be like, we want you on Root Sports to do a segment every broadcast, something like that? Would you be like, okay, that's what I would do? Or because I feel like I could definitely see that for you.
I would entertain it, but I would say that I probably never would want to be employed by the Mariners so that I can
Yeah,
still talk about them in certain ways if need
yeah,
be.
that makes
you know,
sense.
I mean, I'd
Yeah,
be open to ideas, of course. So,
yeah,
and it's like one of my dream jobs would be to be a GM of a baseball team,
hmm,
at the end of the day. But this is kind of a way to do that, and that's where I'm the couch GM. I'm just the guy with the opinion on the couch. I don't have
yeah,
actually any actual say in this.
yeah. No, that makes sense. Well, for anyone who goes to Mariner games a pretty decent amount, because everyone I interview is going to be in potentially different parts of the world. So I always love to ask, what is your perfect game day plan to go to T-Mobile Park? Are you choosing a night game or a day game, and then what are you doing before, during, after?
I would say, I mean, yeah, Friday night game, maybe Saturday night.
Okay.
Also, I mean, Sunday day games are awesome. Also, you
Agreed.
can't really go wrong at T-Mobile Park in the summer.
Yeah.
But I always am in the bullpen. That's just my spot.
Yeah.
I was a pitcher and played outfield in high school, and so being a pitcher, I can truly understand, when these guys are in the bullpen throwing, what they can do, and being at the game and seeing these players on the field, you can understand how good they actually are, because I tried my butt off my entire life and I couldn't get anywhere. And then there's these guys that are Manny Machado or George Kirby being able to manipulate a ball. So,
Yeah.
yeah, hanging out in the bullpen behind the catcher, watching the movement of the pitches. And some of my first videos were me just sitting at the fence with my phone
Yeah. I
and
saw
just
those.
filming guys' bullpens.
Yeah.
Because going back to the fantasy baseball, whenever I would draft a pitcher, I would go to YouTube right after and then type in that guy and try to see as much film as I could on him and see if there was any bullpens to see his stuff. So that's why I started doing those.
Yeah, no, I do agree that there's really nothing better than seeing those pitches live. It's great to see it on TV, especially that the broadcast view that they give. But when you're in person and you can see a straight on like splitter or something just insane, uh,
And you hear that fastball ripping through the
oh,
air.
it's one of the best. I mean, granted, I will say the crack of the bat is a better sound, but that mitt popping is just so good. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I agree. When are you, since you, I saw that you were doing some pitching lessons and whatnot, what kind of spurred you to start doing pitching lessons? Because I think you said something in your Day in the life. I didn't quite catch it that you still play baseball. Is that true?
Yeah, so there's a adult league in Portland. I guess it's technically independent league baseball, which I'm kind of curious because like Justin Tobin played indie ball,
Hmm.
Mark Lowe, who I got the lessons from, he played in that league that I'm in, and I guess that is indie ball. It's independent baseball. It's
Okay.
the Northwest Independent Baseball League. So yeah, I and kind of backing up a little bit. I played club baseball in college. I met a guy on campus my senior year, and we ended up starting a club baseball team at Washington State University. And they hadn't had a club team up to that point, and it's still going today. But yeah, we started a club team up there, and that means that we were traveling to different universities playing their club teams.
Yeah.
So like Boise, Seattle, we went to Montana. And then after graduated college, I got connected to this league around COVID. I took a break for a couple years and then I got back into it. So yeah, I still play adult, baseball down there. It's a lot of fun to be competitive. You see
Yeah.
some solid competition. There was a all Pac-12 closer for the Ducks that ended up pitching against us, and we didn't find
Nice.
out until after the game like who he was. So it's just like random stuff like that. It's a lot of fun to compete.
Yeah, well, that kind of leads into my the first viewer question I have, and Aaron said, "What's his pitch mix?" Because he must have saw your video. So
Yeah.
I saw the backdoor two seam, which I thought was nasty. So yeah, you gotta tell us what you're throwing right now. What's your savant page looking like?
Yeah, it's a four seam fastball. It's a two seam curveball, circle change, and slider.
Nice. Yeah, and what kind of what would you say is your favorite pitch right now, as far as to throw? Because for me, it was always I had a circle change as well when I played, even though it was only until high school. Um, but what's got to be your favorite? I feel like it has to be a breaking pitch, right? Because those are the most fun to throw.
Yeah, I mean throwing a curveball that starts at the guy and he bails out and then it breaks in
Yeah.
for a strike. That's got to be the best pitch. But because I'm never gonna overpower anyone. I'm sitting low 70s. I might hit 75. You never know.
Yeah.
But I've kind of yeah, the two seam I think will be a lot of fun this year, and it's yeah, understanding how to pitch and like where to utilize different pitches,
Hmm.
and then tunneling balls off of each other. And like in high school, I only had a four seam fastball and a curveball.
Okay.
So in playing in this league, I've just been able to mess around with different stuff, going on YouTube to learn how to throw different pitches, and
Mhm.
then practicing and learning. So, and then I got connected to Mark Lowe because the batting cage that my adult league practiced in, Mark actually ended up buying that place. And
Okay.
so I reached out to the old guy. I was like, hey, we're trying to rent the cages. He was like, it was actually bought out by Mark. So got connected with him and it's become a pretty cool relationship.
Nice. Yeah, what would you say as far as pitching goes so far? What has been your most satisfying strikeout? Because I have one in the back of my head. It's one of my favorite memories from when I played in high school, and it's the most like basic like pitching sequence ever. It's like that fastball. That kid seems like he's on it, and then I hit him with the changeup, and just swings right through it, practically out of his shoes. I thought I was Cy Young at that point, which is even though that's the most basic like pitch sequencing like move ever. Has there been a satisfying like I guess Matt Brash, Jose Ramirez type K for
Yeah.
you?
There is actually one that comes to mind. So my senior year, I was our closer in high school, and it was the Clark County All Star game,
Okay,
and I had somehow, it was my one inning, and I somehow got the bases loaded, and coming up to the plate was a Stanford guy. He was going to go play baseball at Stanford. He was a all
dang.
county catcher. So the scouting report on him was that he can't hit a curveball.
Okay,
So I throw the first curveball, just loop it in there right down the middle. He takes it. The second one is a little lower. He swings over it. And then the third one, I throw another curveball and it's in the dirt. He swings over it. I get out of the inning, bases loaded, jam,
nice.
strike out the Stanford guy, and you know that was my claim to fame, I guess.
Nice. So, would you say you're a big fan of like the pitching ninja like videos since you
Oh, for
love pitching
sure.
so much? Then I gotta
Yeah.
ask. I would imagine the Bryce Miller like splitter stuff that's been coming out has got to be so interesting for you. So, how much of a weapon do you think that's going to end up being for him this year?
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome because it's funny because I was in my pre-spring training interview with Bryce. I was asking him about his pitch mix, and he really just had that one fastball coming into the season.
Yeah,
And I did a podcast with Pete Woodworth, the pitching coach, and asked about Bryce Miller, and like he said, he came into the season with one pitch and he left with like 30. And that's kind of how it goes in the big leagues. It seems is that you got to the big leagues by doing one thing, and then
hmm
you have to really figure out how to stay in the big leagues and how to get guys out. Um, but yeah, I mean, like with his fast, like he learned a two seam last year, and now he has like a cutter, a slider, and a sweeper. He's got a full arsenal of pitches, but he never had an out pitch really against lefties. So they
yeah,
were hitting his fastball pretty well, I think. And you know, like during my pitching session with Mark Lowe, we talked about it's kind of awkward and intimidating to throw a slider into a lefty as a right-handed pitcher
yep,
because you're working right into his swing path. And if you miss with a slider on a lefty, that's going to go over the fence.
hmm
Versus if you miss with a righty, it's going to probably just be in the dirt type thing. But
yeah,
yeah, with his pitch mix, he has things that are breaking glove side. He never had something that was breaking arm side, aside from the two seam. So that splitter should be huge. And like Gilbert learned a splitter last off season, and the reason why is because he was throwing a circle change before, but with the circle change you have to pronate and you have to like twist your arm to make it dive like it does, and it's hard to control that pitch with
yeah.
that motion. And so the splitter allows them to stay behind the ball, throw it like a fastball, but it still has that same action like the changeup.
Okay.
So that being said, Bryce Miller should be able to command the pitch on top of it being nasty.
Nice. And it's very interesting to hear about that because I don't know that level of like intricacy when it comes to how the pitches are thrown. I didn't know the circle change gets pronated. I remember when I threw it, I just
Yeah.
threw it straight up. So I think it just was slower and that's how it worked, I guess. But so I guess I said on Twitter that this was gonna be a lot more of an interview type thing, but I guess I have to ask, like, when it comes to the 2024 season and how the off seasons went so far, just generally, what are your thoughts about how the off seasons went and how, um, I guess, like, what are you looking forward to when it comes to the 2024 roster? I think there's a lot of things to like, but at the end of the day, everyone focuses on all the negative stuff that's going on.
Right.
So, kind of from your point of view, are you feeling kind of neutral from where we ended 2023 to where we're at now? Do you feel more excited, less excited? Where you at?
So I always tend to be a glass half full type guy. I'm always just optimistic, for better or worse. It's like when the initial trade started happening, like Gino being traded, that
hmm
just sucks to see. You can understand why. Then the Kelnick trade happens. It's like, oh my gosh, and we got back basically just a reliever for Kelnick, and we were
Yeah.
salary dumping him. Kelnick, you were salary dumping Kelnick. Um, I mean, it's like when you look into the details, you can understand why the Mariners had one of the lowest OPSs in baseball last year, pretty much all season. They were around like 23 for most of the year in baseball in
Yep.
OPS, and their clutch metrics, I'm sure, were awful. They had three of the top eight guys in strikeouts. Gino Teo and Kelnick were the top three strikeout percentage guys for the Mariners.
Yep.
So obviously it makes sense that they're trying to shift away from relying on power and walks and strikeouts and
hmm
trying to go to more consistently and bat to ball skills. And you need guys to make contact with the ball in certain situations.
Yep.
um, I mean, I'm optimistic again because I didn't even know who Dominic Canzone was until that policy wall trade happened. But then you look at the metrics on the guy, and then also you look at Ryan Bliss, and you traded 1.5 years of a reliever that is basically Topa. You could replace with all these other guys, Prelander Broa, all these other guys, relievers that were added this offseason. Um, I mean, Dominic Canzone could have a huge season. Ty France at drive line, of course, people will
Yeah.
say, "Oh, that's not." But you look at Ty France, and he's always hit every year until he got hurt, and then he, had a down season. So I wish that they would have committed to going out and really adding true impact to the lineup.
Yeah.
Mitch Garver could be impact, but with his injury history, he basically can't catch because a majority of his injuries were catching related.
Yep.
So if he could stay healthy, then that's a great pickup. Mitch Haniger coming back, nostalgic. That's awesome. And
The vibes are high.
he had a 39-100 season back in 21.
Yep.
So I'm optimistic. I think the top 7 of the lineup actually look. The more you look at it, the better I feel. I'm going to be making a player profile on Luke Rayleigh probably this weekend to really dive into who he is. But that Caballero for Rayleigh trade might have been a huge steal.
Yeah.
Um, and then having a top 5 rotation in baseball is never a bad thing. So,
Of
and they
course.
didn't have to trade a young starter.
Yeah. I would say for me, I feel like a lot of the hard feelings, I've said this so many times already, but like I feel like a lot of the hard feelings came from just the sequence of events that occurred in the order that it happened, right? Like
And that's
you
not mentioning the 54% and like all
yeah,
that stuff right when the
co-
season ended.
yeah, coming off this colossal collapse where we're in the division lead at the end of August, and then September, those they
Yeah.
better be burning those tracksuits that they wore to New York. And then you have the horrible press conference that just makes you the laughing stock of the community in MLB. It feels like
Yeah.
Gino goes away, Kalanick goes away. Both were what feel like peanuts. I mean, you can have your opinions on Vargas or Kowar even if you really want to, but um, so it's like if you would maybe have gotten that Mitch Garver signing to break it up, maybe this fan base is feeling a little bit better. I mean, people are still going to be canceling their season tickets and all that stuff, but
Yeah.
I think that's where it came. Is like it felt like that rock bottom, especially after such a big high after making the postseason and the the series in Toronto and that huge comeback, and even if you were knocked out of the first round, you're like, this team's got it. We'll just re-gear for next year, and then it just plummets like it did. Um,
And
yeah, go
at
ahead.
the real quick, have to also say at the same time, as far as every fan wants to blame the front office, if Julio were to play his average self the last week of the
Mm,
year, if anything were to happen, if any of the players were to not underperform,
yeah,
then they would be in the playoffs. They were that close.
yeah, yeah. I know, and that's one of the things I come back to when people are saying like, "Oh, it's a sub 500 team, and this team sucks and whatnot." I'm like, they were one game away. They got eliminated on game 161. Like, just like if they were on the precipice, right? And they were really only beat out by by Texas, who had just everything go right that season, really, other than I guess your injuries to DeGrom and Scherzer, but everything else. I mean, all their players were playing out of their mind, how they never have before. So
Rookies coming up, performing right away. I mean, you
yeah,
expected Grom to be on the IL anyways, so they had
mhm.
a surplus of pitching to account for that. But yeah,
Yeah. So it's like we were already one win away, and so it's like, yeah, we could go out and get a Bellinger, we could go out and get an Otani at the very beginning of the offseason, even though I don't think anyone actually thought that was going to happen. Um, So, and I get the frustration with not getting one of those big name guys who you could, as soon as you hear their name, you're like, oh yeah, that's going to be great for us. But honestly, I feel like the way you have to look at this roster now is their floor is better than it was last year, because their floor last year, and we saw it, was absolutely terrible. It was just horrible to watch, just stomach inducing to be honest with you.
yeah,
So, and I don't, although they're still going to have those spurts this year, they absolutely, and I do feel uncomfortable with how many guys we really have to rely on to be healthy. So we still have to rely on a lot to go right for us to really make a good postseason push. But regardless, like the floor, in my opinion, is so much higher than it was last year, even if the ceiling maybe isn't, or is, hasn't really been pushed that much.
yeah, definitely. And you can also there's also guys in the minor leagues, of course. It's never a great thing to be banking on, minor
Hmm.
league players to come up and perform. But you got Ryan Bliss, you got Deloach there, you got Locklear, other guys potentially that can come up and make an impact. And if they replace Dylan Moore or Haggerty or some of these other spots to where it's, fringe utility guys, then, that could be the depth that you need. And if one of them comes up and takes Luis Arias's spot at third base or, something, then I mean, like I said, I was talking with Mariner Mojo last night and just reading through the lineup makes me feel a little better every time. It's like 1 through 7, I don't think is that bad.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think and I get people's apprehension for wanting to like the team or for not being impressed. I get it, but at the end of the day, like I feel like baseball is such you want to enjoy it and you want to really get behind the guys that you have. And so it's like when I see the Mariners account posting like even the Garver quote today where he was just saying how much how exciting it was for this team and all the good things that go along with it. And it's like, oh, they're holding him at gunpoint just to say that. And it's like,
Right.
I mean, granted, it's funny, but at the same time, like, I don't disagree with anything he said, and he made really good points. And, it feels like I've seen so many people say, like, I want players to choose Seattle. I want them to, regardless, not even just the Mariners. I've heard this about the Seahawks. I've heard this about UW, even with like the DeBoer thing recently. Like, you want someone to choose to be in Seattle. Like, Garver pretty much like said he chose here. Like, this was the place he felt like made the most sense for him and he wanted to go. So it's like we got to take that when we get it, since that's something that people clearly want so much. You want that guy to feel at home at T-Mobile Park. Like, make him feel at home. Be like, this is awesome that this guy has optimism for our team. Um,
Right.
so yeah, but I'll get into the last viewer question, and then I have one more question to end it off on. So we'll go with Stu asked, would you rather have an elite rotation or elite lineup? And if you select elite lineup, your rotation is bottom of the barrel, and vice versa. Um, I feel like there's got to be an obvious choice to this personally, but I want to know what you think.
I mean, I would say rotation
Yeah.
because, I mean, if you can force a team to score 3 runs or less every night, you have a pretty good shot of, one of your crappy guys in your lineup hitting a dinger or just getting a few bloops and he's scoring a run. You play true baseball, you get a guy on, you know, bunt him over again or something and get a base hit or any combination, sack fly.
Hmm.
And if your rotation is elite and you have George Kirby throwing every night, then I mean, they can't win if they don't score runs.
Yeah, I that was going to be my answer as well. I think that the saying is pitching wins championships. I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
You can't have a starting rotation as like a 6 ERA and expect it to be anything
Oh yeah, no.
the same.
You'd be
I mean,
bottom of the league.
you're the Oakland A's basically at that point,
Right.
and you don't want to be the Oakland A's now. And we kind of saw this last year. I mean, there were times when the rotation and the pitching is what kept us in games to be able to win them. Now, granted, last year we didn't do a great job about taking those opportunities every time, but the Mariners are the perfect, I guess, blueprint for why you want to pick the rotation every time. You want that stacked rotation uh, to prevent those runs. And I guess you could even put this for the bullpen too, right? Like,
I was
I
gonna
would,
say they have an elite rotation and an
yeah,
elite bullpen. So you have
exactly.
that. I mean, you're set up pretty well.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of a no brainer. I would much rather have a rotation or a better rotation than
Yeah.
the lineup. So um, yeah, and I guess the last question we'll have is the one I want to ask every guest that comes on here that's new. Uh, and I think I know your answer already, but we'll go. It's a two-part question. If you were an MLB player right now, would you choose to be a hitter where you have a walk-up song that plays 3 times a day or 3 times a game and you only get 15 seconds, but it plays more often? Or would you rather be a closer? You only come in 40 to 60 times a year. And so, but you get all the production with it. You get the walk in, all that stuff. So, what are you choosing for that?
Yeah, I would have to say I'd have to be part of the Los Bomberos, the
Absolutely.
bullpen. be the closer, come in with the lights in the stadium, and just to be in that pressure situation,
Mm,
up 3 runs or less in the ninth inning, just the crowd loud, all that excitement.
yeah.
That's the Yeah, just that energy is amazing.
And what's the song you're choosing?
I don't have a song off the top of my head, outside of something like Thunderstruck or something
Okay.
like that. Um,
Do you have a
yeah, I don't
favorite
have a
closer
song.
entrance of all time?
Favorite closer entrance. Let me think. Brian Wilson's. I made a video about the Los Bomberos entry,
Mm.
and there was like Brian Wilson. There was the guy from the Padres. I remember JJ Putz. I think was he Thunderstruck?
I
JJ Putz
think
when he was playing for the Mariners.
something like that. Yeah. I want to
Yeah,
say it was
I mean
that.
Edwin, and then it's funny because Edwin Diaz had the exact same walkout music in Seattle as he did in the Mets, but of course
Mm.
because the Mariners don't get the publicity, it didn't become popular until he was on the East Coast.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah. I always bring it up every time. My favorite of all time is always going to be Grant Balfour, and when he was with the Oakland A's, played that Metallica song was so sick. I did just remember gosh, was it Trevor Hoffman that had Hell's Bells by AC/DC? I think
okay,
that's
yeah,
super
you're
sick
right.
too. Um,
And then
so
Mariano Rivera, Enter Sandman.
yeah, I would say, I feel like Mariano's like the easy answer, so that's why I choose not to say him because, like, of course, whenever you think of closer entrances, I guess at this point you're thinking Rivera or Diaz now, if you're looking at like the new school of players. But, um, yeah, I think there's nothing like it, and those that Los Bomberos is always so electric when
Yeah,
you're there. It's
right.
something else. So,
Yeah, it's really cool.
yeah, and I guess you mentioned it earlier about the fantasy baseball, so I might as well like somewhat like kind of soft announce it at the end of the pod and whatnot. I haven't mentioned it on online yet, just because I wasn't. I still feel like there's still stuff to work out, but we are creating a Mariners Creator League on fantasy baseball this year. Me and the Mariner Mojo guys are kind of spearheading it. And then Connor is going to be a part of it. We have the Marine Layer guys, the Patrick from Mariner Muse who runs that account. Then who else? I feel like I'm on the spot now, so I'm gonna forget who's all in it. Jay from Jay's Trident podcast is in it. I actually think that might be it. Uh, yeah, because I think that's about eight. So there's eight of us in total. So that's going to be really exciting towards the start of the actual baseball year. There will be content coming out at least on my channel, and I've encouraged others to make content on off if they want. It's 100% optional to everyone else, but um, yeah, we're going to do a draft. I'm hoping to make a video about that and kind of just updates uh, every week or so about how things are going. And this kind of piggybacks off what I asked earlier about just kind of building those connections within the community and trying to kind of help each other when it comes to growing and getting our voices out there. So, yeah, expect to see that in the future. That'll be really fun. I'm excited for that to get going. Do you have an
Have a good
idea
time.
on like who your top picks are? Do you already have that planned out?
Aside from Julio, um, yeah. Well, it's funny because the big league that I'm in right now, there's a ton of Dodgers fans.
Okay.
So it's funny because you kind of understand certain people's biases. And so I can understand that I'll be able to get some Mariners at a lower round than these guys
Yeah,
because they're getting all the Dodgers guys, they're getting all the big names.
of
Meanwhile,
course.
I can get like a George Kirby mid to mid rounds, whereas he could win a Cy Young at any time.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
I feel like it'll be a Mariner bias draft, I would imagine, with a lot of the big Mariners names going pretty
Yeah,
early.
yeah, for
But
sure. It'll be the
yeah,
flip. It'll be the flip side.
right.
And you probably got to account for some American League bias, maybe too, outside of like your Otanis and your obvious choices in the National League. So,
And also
um,
8 man is gonna be stacked because our
mhm.
league is 14 teams.
Oh, really? Okay. So
Yeah,
you,
so 8, it's gonna be a bit more stacked.
Yeah,
the
but
teams.
I think that'll be fun though. I was kind of like when I was creating, I was kind of debating like how many people should I invite, and I mean, granted, it's not like I know a lot of people, and like I've never even talked to the Marine Layer guys before. I asked them. I don't think I had talked to you until then
Yeah.
either. So I was just like, okay, well, let's see who even wants to do it. But I felt like 8 was good because it's like a good little core of people, and like you said, it's gonna be a stacked draft, right? So it's like there's not gonna be any people picking
Bottom of
like
the barrel. Like the waiver wire is going to
yeah.
be strong.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so excited. It'll be my first time ever playing, so I'm feel like I'm going to
Okay.
be outclassed a bit, especially for veterans like you of the fantasy baseball side. But I can imagine it's going to be really fun. I think people will enjoy some of the content around that too. So very excited. But yeah, that's going to do it for this podcast or for this episode of the You Love to See a podcast. Thank you again, Connor, for taking the time out of your day to come on. Any last words you have for the people?
Thank you for having me on. Um, yeah, just try to keep your head up. I mean, we'll see where things are at spring training, but it's always going to be a good time at T-Mobile Park in Seattle, that's for sure. But I'm optimistic. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it so much. Once again, if you can find all the links for Connor's socials in the description as well. I have to keep remembering to say that because I feel like there's been so many outros that I haven't said that, and I feel really bad. But once again, you can find the episodes of this on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music. So you can subscribe, follow, leave a 5-star review, whatever you do on the platform you're watching this on. So yeah, that'll be it for this episode. My name is Jake, and I will see you next week.